before we start, I want to introduce Rob, who's to my left. He's my building partner and the co-creator of this exhibit, and the person when I said, I have the story that goes with this, and it doesn't work in art notes. It's related, but it's an actual narrative story. And he said, why don't we create a book? And so he went and created the book. And the book, it's not an exhibit catalog. To me, it exemplifies, it really excites me because it's one of the first times I've felt that I've come close to realizing the goal that got me here in the first place of using the tools of Second Life and quote virtual reality to create kinds of literature that I can't with paper and pencil. So that's what motivates this. And I can't imagine building anything without a narrative. If I go to a region, that's the first thing I do is start either start reading their story that comes through, or I'll start making up a story. But I'm a writer, and so I'm primarily verbally oriented. And the reason I was sent here, and I literally was sent here by an editor who was just sick and tired of listening to me whine, oh, I'm never going to write fiction because I can't visualize things in space. I can't move characters around. It's a hassle, blah, 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 excuse. But they were valid. And so he said, why don't you go look at this, and you can you can set up a scene. And I was having trouble with a particular scene because I don't think spatially, basically, which is funny that now I'm working in a spatial environment. He was dead right. I could build it and walk the characters through it. And then that very soon became, wait a minute, here's a better way of telling the story. Yeah, Rob is going to grin and thinks about early sister I still walk into walls a lot and fall off platforms, but I'm getting better slowly. Well, it's the spatial needs. I am spatially challenged. I think there are two kinds of brains: those that think in terms with words and those that think in images. It's why in the fourth grade, where I went to school, you took half a year of art and half a year of music. Well, in the fourth grade, they called my mother and they said, we're going to have to take your child out of the art class and we'll just let her have the whole year of music because she's hopeless. She cannot draw. She cannot paint. She's hopeless. So I'm that bad. And the sad thing is I've always wanted to paint. Always wanted to, quote, create art. Well, Second Life lets me come as close as I'm ever going to come. I don't agree that I didn't have the right tools or the right teacher. I think some things you're born with. Leonardo da Vinci did not become who he is because of the tools. There's just that raw, innate talent. My brain isn't wired that way. I can recognize good art, and Second Life lets me actually create a kind of art that is pleasing to me. I mean, I have a good sense of proportion and all that kind of stuff. I just can't draw. That's a good description. Anyway, all of us love the written word, and we love stories, and we know that words are important. And here we are in this overwhelmingly visual environment, and yet it's the words that matter, and it's the words that inform the images. And without words, whether they're part of a story or the words we hear in our own mind when we look at something, that to me is the joy of Second Life. I'm hoping that by looking at some of this, it'll spark all of us to create better stories and better words using the tools here. The best painters are often the best drawers, but with Second Life, I can come close. And what I can do, there was a wonderful interview with J.K. Rowling after Harry Potter got to be so successful. And they were asking her, where did all this come from? And she said, and it was the first time I'd ever heard another writer describe exactly what happens to me. She said, I was on a train and I saw this figure walking down the aisle and I saw the story, the whole thing laid out. And she said, and then I just started writing it because there it was. It was right there in front of me. And I think that's how a lot of writers work. You will see something that triggers a story, and the training comes is in knowing how to put that story that you suddenly see in your head onto paper. And for me, it was with this, which is the story. The exhibit was created for Relay for Life Home and Garden Expo, which raises, and they raised 4 million lindens in 3 weeks, which is pretty impressive. And in the last 7 years, I think they've raised 3.7 million US dollars, not linden dollars, real, coin of the realm dollars, which is incredibly impressive to me. But the exhibit was created for that, and the starting point was a painting I happened to see about a week before, and it's the one right in front of me. It's called The Wounded Angels, and it was by a Finnish artist named Hugo Simberg. When he first showed it in 1903, it had no title, and he said, it has no title because everyone will write his own story when he sees it. It's, to me, a remarkable painting. And I saw the painting and was struck by it and immediately, saved it and put it in my inventory with, framed it up, put it in my inventory with, one day I'm going to do something with this. Then somebody came to me and said, would you do an exhibit for the expo? It's to raise money for breast cancer research, and specifically breast cancer. So that was the trigger, that was the impetus. And then the story followed from that one image. And I thought, okay, what would I do if I were diagnosed with breast cancer? And my answer is I would gather up the things that I love and that are important to me and the people, surround myself with it. And so the story is about a woman artist who you don't see and who is diagnosed with a recurrence of breast cancer. And so she has this wonderful meadow behind her house, which is, we all need antihistamines because it's in full bloom. And so she gathered up reproductions of paintings that she liked, all of whom are of women who, in history, who died of breast cancer. And she puts them up on easels, and then she goes around the house and picks up objects that have meaning for her, that were gifts from friends or family heirlooms, and she puts those there. And she basically creates a haven within her own garden. And of course, gardens have always been a symbol for healing and of sanctuary. And it's where she goes to sort of gather herself and arm herself for the battle with the enemy. From that story, the exhibit gets built. And then the interesting thing for me is the objects start telling their own story that go beyond what's here. And it's a hard process to explain. I think we've all had that experience of you build something and it'll start talking to you. For example, the stool that's to the left of the Wounded Angel is an Ashanti chief's stool. So a friend of mine, who's in Second Life, built it, and I've always liked it. And but anyway, the story that develops is there's a character in the real life book that I've been working on, who is Zula Marie McLean, and she's this amazing cook. She's an African American and somewhat mysterious, very opinionated, very know-it-all, but adorable. Anyway, she is a neighbor of the artist, and she gives her the stool because it is a chief's stool and has great power. She gives her the stool to use to one as a way of expressing, you're going to make it, and here's something of mine that I give to you. So that informs the story, and I'll take that image and I'll use it in the real life manuscript, which I had no plan to do and never would have thought of if I hadn't built the exhibit. So go around, cam around, and look at each object. The Rob doesn't know this. He created the fresco in the church, there's a wall sconce. I'm going to go over there. You'll never find it. This is a little more compressed than I would like it to be, but I had a 20 by 20 meter space to fit all this into. Anyway, this wall sconce, which is Rob built this pretty soon after I joined Second Life. I saw a picture or something and said, "Oh, this is so pretty. I would love to have this." And so he very sweetly went and built it. And at that point, I couldn't even raise a prim. And then I think I came back later and added the candle. And in the story, it's another thing that another neighbor has given to the woman to have, and that the woman holds very dear. And in the story that is the next installment of this, she will explain how that works. That's the general outline of the story. The story is written for the exhibit. What she does is she sits in her chair and she looks at each image, and she goes around, and hopefully we're going to add the SL experience tools and create this in about 6 months from now, another exhibit where you come and you will immediately be joined by a docent. And it will basically be the unseen woman, and she will take you to look at each painting, and they will talk to you. The woman will explain why that painting. There's one in back of a woman who died in the 1738 of breast cancer at the age of 38. And she has on a powdered wig, as women did in that era. And the woman in the story asks her, "Did you wear the powdered wig to hide your hair? Did you lose your hair?" And of course, they didn't have treatments in those days that caused you to lose your hair, but it was a way in the story for the woman to express her own fear, her own loss of femininity. Would she lose her hair? I have this installation at my home sim, and I frequently go and sit in the chair, look at the images, and rest. All of you who write will know the effort to, in words, convey that impression that the woman follows a ritual to give her a piece, creating a place apart where she can withdraw, gather herself together, and voice her fears in safety and in a place of healing. Those are hard concepts to put into words, and I had struggled as part of this real life manuscript called Rural Access. There is a character who develops a very serious illness, and I've struggled how to write it without it becoming a soap opera. I don't do big emotional scenes very well, don't like them. And yet it was essential to the overall story that this woman is ill, and in the story it's how she handles it, but it's also really most importantly how the community around her uses her illness to forge bonds among themselves. And so it's essential to the story, and I never really had a way to figure it. I kept putting it on the back burner, like, well, I'll deal with that later, because I couldn't figure out how to do it. Well, now I know how I'm doing it. My real life character doesn't have the same diagnosis, but she does the exact same thing. She is an artist, and who moves to this little town, doesn't really know anybody, and is a little bit of a misfit because after all she's really arty, and she's moved to this little town in rural the rural American South, and they frown on artists and think they're some kind of communist freaks or something. So she's pretty much of an isolate, and then she gets ill, and her friends and her neighbors, these are the gifts they bring her. The sconce that Rob made, you don't know this, Rob, that was made by Emil Redwing. He's the sheriff, and the last person you would think of as having any artistic talent, and yet he makes this beautiful piece of arts and crafts wood carving and presents it to her. So you learn more about him, and you learn about her, and you learn about how communities and friendships are built. No, you didn't know. I didn't tell you. Yes, suspicious and unruly characters. that to me is the fun and also the real value of this technology. It lets us experiment in so many ways with what we write, create a level of immersion that I can't with paper and pencil. And what I would really like to see happen is for people, you all will have your own story. Virtual worlds create new kinds of literacy. And I think we all agree they do. And they challenge wordsmiths like me to rethink their relationship with readers as well as with the tools of wordcraft and publishing. I mean, we didn't have any of this 10 years ago. It's 3D literacy. And I remember I was complaining. I used to write a syndicated column biweekly. I loved doing it because I had no constraints. I could literally write about anything I wanted. And the only limit I had was a target of between 7 and 900 words, which is a nice length for a column. Long story short, advertising revenues control how big a newspaper or what a syndicate can do. And print media is going away, and we all know it. But when they came and said, I'm sorry, you've got a 500 word limit, that's all the space we can give you anymore. Don't have a quarter of a page anymore. I kind of thought about it, and I wrote my editor back and I said, I can't do it in 500 words. Not what I want to do. I mean, some things are fine but I just basically said, no, I don't want to do it. I miss writing the column, but here I can do much more. I have more than just 500 words. I have maybe 1,500 if I need them, or I simply build the image, let it tell the story. So fundamentally, this is changing. And I tried to talk to my editor. I said, what if we did the following? What if we had this in a virtual world and in print? And they just looked at me like, you're out of your mind. And I called my real life mother and I said, is there any way I can convince these people? And she just laughed and she said, well, I couldn't convince anybody in 1983 that electronic mail made sense. And she gave up a very nice career to go off and run the first online system that offered intersystem mail. That was sort of her contribution to the technology. She said people need to be able to reach whomever, and this was before domain addressing. But, she said, no, you're not going to be able to explain it. People have to experience it. And just like everybody looked at me like I was crazy when I said email it will replace postal mail. She said, what you're doing now, y'all are the early adopters, and what you're doing newspaper publishing will either fall by the wayside or get with the program, basically. And words give images, and which is going to bring me to the quote that really is the best thing. We have the best quote of all. Words matter. Language is the heart and soul of our stories, past, present, and yet to come. And no, I didn't do it because I had to. I did it because it's the best thing I have yet heard that sums up both the challenge and the opportunity that this media provides for us. Words do matter. I mean, I don't know about any of you, but I'm so tired. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, first, that little bromide was not some traditional point of wisdom, and it wasn't referring to literature. It was the invention of an advertising agency in 1911. And basically, it was talking about how to sell, I think it was Doan's little liver pills. And some very wise ad man said, don't try to describe it, draw a picture. And it was a picture of a man holding his back. And that's where that expression came from. A picture is worth 1,000 words. And I agree in terms of if you're trying to sell a product, I think pictures really are oftentimes better than words. But if you're trying to tell a story, you need words. But the picture is still valued in a number of words. Yes, it is. Did you know that on Facebook, there are 3 million images a day? That boggles my mind. We are all suffering from visual overload. And I suffer from it in Second Life. My eyes just get so tired of absorbing things. If there isn't a narrative, I find I leave a sim. I'll go look at and I'm not pointing fingers at any designer or any event, but you all, I think, have all had the experience. You go someplace and there is so much, and I'm the biggest prim hog, and I put a lot of detail, but I hope the detail all goes to advance a narrative. But you'll go look at a build, or you'll go look at a sim, and there's just stuff everywhere. And yeah, it's just taking up space, or it's pretty, or it's a designer's ego speaking, which is the other point of, to be effective, I think Second Life requires the same degree of discipline that you have to apply to writing good prose. You have to edit and edit and edit, and every object you place has to have a purpose. It has to advance the narrative. It can't just be there because it looks good. Every item that I have here has some bearing on the story, or it doesn't belong. And Rob will attest to it. I go through fits. I put things out, I take it away. Put things out, take it away. It's because I'm trying to find the thing that triggers the next thought in a narrative, whether that narrative is written or whether it's a narrative that you visually perceive, and then bring your own experience to bear to start telling your own story. What I can't do as a writer is step into your shoes. I can only invite you to come and step into my character's shoes, and to immerse yourself in the story that I'm creating. And what I see glimmers of sometime, not in my work yet, I don't think I've succeeded at this point in creating a setting or a story that is truly what I call immersive, in terms of the viewer comes and doesn't view it, but becomes a participant in it and actually starts driving the narrative. And that as the quote author, I step back and let the community start shaping the direction. And I don't think we have the tools yet to do that effectively. Some of the tools that I've been told about, and I have somebody now helping me, I have to learn which end of the paintbrush to pick up to use effectively to be able to create that. It means taking over some of the control, and SL experiences come into play, but to be able to sort of shape a viewer into truly interacting with the story and then taking the story to the next level. And yeah, it is my dream, and I think it will happen. It'll come. I don't know if it'll come in Second Life. I don't know what the platform will be, but I think it will come. It will come. I can remember being a little kid, and because I grew up in quote online, and these people, this was, well, I guess I was 10 or 11. So we're talking about the very early 80s, when there were no graphics, there was no internet. There were just a bunch of geeks, basically, who would sit up late at night using time-sharing equipment when there was off and dial-up. And they would create whole worlds with just ASCII text. And a lot of those people worked out the compression algorithms to be able to transmit graphics. And that was the beginning of a lot of this, and the beginning of the kind of communities that you have in Second Life. So fast forward, that was 30 years ago, nearly 30 years ago. Wonder what we're going to have in 30 years. I don't think we can even imagine. If somebody looks at this exhibit and it doesn't touch them or affect them in any way, then either I have failed or the exhibit has failed. What they get from it, I don't know. I mean, I said, Safia asked me in the Designing World segment, what did I hope when I built this? What was my goal? And quite simply, my goal was that if one woman looks at this and goes and gets a breast mammogram as a result, then the exhibit will have succeeded. And the whole point was facts and figures and medical textbooks talking about breast cancer pales in comparison to seeing an image of a woman with breast cancer, like the one nude that almost got the exhibit banned because there was a, you can't show naked people. And that Rembrandt's painting of Bathsheba at her bath, he painted it of his mistress, who was the model, and she had breast cancer. And Rembrandt always painted things as they were, and he painted her with a very visible lesion on her breast. And it's one of the art critics. It's one of the finest nudes that's ever been painted, and probably I think it's his best. It's my favorite painting of his because you see the relationship between the artist and the model. To me, is so clear in this. This is a woman he dearly loves. He puts a human face on breast cancer. That beyond that, what story does this collection of paintings and stuff trigger in you, other than there sure are a lot of flowers? She must have some really good dirt. That's all I have to say. That's the other thing I love about Second Life. You can just have flowers anytime you want. I hope we are all here to see it happen. And I think we all will be. And just think how exciting that will be. Think of the stories that we can all tell. There are so many Sims that are gone. I know that the nature of this is all ephemeral. I wish, if I win the lottery, I'm gonna have to create a place where Sims of value go and can be archived and never are lost. Talking people would be new, and just think the simultaneous translation into English, German, French, Dutch, Japanese, Chinese, etc., etc., etc. Because the one limitation of this is it is very much Western art. I mean, this is a celebration of Western art traditions. It would be better if it were more Catholic, but I didn't have time, to be honest, and I don't yet have the skills. I'm limited in what I can build. If there isn't a mesh template, I can't make it. The other part of this story is you go through the exhibit catalog, the sort of traditional art notes that accompany each image, and then there's the story. And Rob was the one who figured out how to do this, of the woman talking to each image. And then at the end, her husband, who has been watching his wife from afar, making her circuit around the paintings, he then speaks and expresses his fears and his hopes. And that's how the book closes, and it's a love story. So it's more than just an exhibit about breast cancer. And there would be no way, I don't believe, that you could do it as effectively in quote traditional publishing. It would not have the immediacy. It was a counterpoint, and that's the other thing is writing. As all of you who writing is lonely and it's isolating. That to me. I mean, I write for a living. That is the hardest part of I work alone, and you don't. Yes, I get a feedback from an editor, but it's not the same. Here, we actually write in a community. I'm a good writer. I'm a better writer for having other people input and spark off what I create. So I think the whole concept of authorship changes here, and it changes for the better. I don't like to voice what I've written. I just feel awkward doing it. But she's very true in when you write something, when you read it and react, hear an audience react to it, and also you hear your own words spoken, it's a great editing tool. You go, ooh, that sounds rough. I need to go work on that. I over edit what I write, so I give Rob the raw, and he distills it and leaves what's the best. I think all of us here in Second Life, part of the reason we're here is there is a shared inspiration, whether it's we go to hear a reading and we all share in hearing a story being told, and that changes the story to a degree, and it changes us. It all goes back to how important words are.